What is the blueprint of how to set up goals and actually achieve them?
6% of people actually write goals down. 4% of that actually hit goals. The reason most people don't hit their goals is because the second reason that people don't hit it is the reason organizations don't fulfill their full potential. The reason leaders can't get above their businesses. People that end up actually getting better results recognize that the thing that changes results is everyone wants to be compensated better. The only way your compensation changes is if you focus on like, okay, what area of my life do I want to change? If you want to become more valuable, you actually have to get a bigger vision, but a vision of impacting, a vision of serving other people, a vision that's bigger than yourself. You can only dream as big as the problem you're willing to take ownership for. Pain is never meant to just sit there and be forever damaging. It's actually meant to me, I've often found that people's pain becomes their purpose. And build a leader.
How do you identify a leader?
The leader will build great teams. And if you can build great teams, you can build great organizations. And if you can build great organizations, they can change the world.
What do you think is power? What's the difference between power and leadership? Do you believe in predestination? How would you like you to be remembered? Do you think that leaders have to babysit?
The other reason sometimes you get stuck in micromanagement is because you give someone a result, but don't let them influence the how. Really what it comes down to is a process. We call it like the vision acceleration system. So number one, start with, if you want to change your identity, aka where you are to where you want to be, you actually have to change your habits. Purpose is passion, passion is purpose. It's not true. Passion, I believe, is on the other side of purpose. The question is, how do we find our purpose? Well, what are you willing to suffer for? And so that would be my question to you, Marco.
That's a great question.
The worst thing in the world is you could get up the top of the mountain and realize you climbed the wrong mountain. And you spent your whole life climbing the wrong mountain.
Oh my gosh.
Hoping that achievement would actually satisfy. Achievement won't satisfy what purpose is meant to. The mountain of success is the wrong mountain. The mountain of purpose is the one you want to climb.
I'm so excited for today's show. I have here my man, Alex Klott.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good, man.
Good to see you, bro.
I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you too.
Great
You
to
look
meet you in
great.
person. I
Yeah.
heard so much about you. I once was in one of the conference with Valor. I saw you speaking. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is mind-blowing. You were representing your company, Vival Group.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, Vival.
Vival, yeah.
It's all good, bro.
You got the Italian.
You got the accent with it, so it's good.
You got the Italian.
Makes it sound better.
And yeah, man, like you focus on leadership strategy, how set up goals and actually achieve them,
Yeah.
purpose in life.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this, bro. Like, how can a human being that is watching this podcast can learn from you and become a best version of themselves?
Wow, no pressure, but no, and I'm honored to be here. It was an honor to be speaking at that
Thank you,
conference.
man.
I love John and the whole team and what you guys are building there. And so I would say, in general, when it comes to if we want to make a difference, right? If we want to change people's lives, it always comes back to ownership, right? So for me, everybody, and I kind of shared this at the conference. Everyone wants to change their results. Every single human being on the planet wants to change their results. They're like, I want my business to be different. I want my sales to be different. I want my employees to be different. I want my body to be different. I want to be healthier. I want to be in better shape. I want my marriage to be better. Everyone wants everything in their life. They want the results to be better. And the people that end up actually getting better results recognize that just wanting better results doesn't change your results.
Sure.
And if you focus only on your results, ultimately you'll actually never get lasting change. And so I kind of, began to wonder, well, what actually changes results? And if you look at it, it's not actually results that change results. The thing that changes results is value. So if you want something to change, and I remember the first time I heard this concept was when I got invited to this mastermind. There's a guy named Garrett Gunderson. And one of my mentors had invited me, and there was no reason for me to be in this room. This was a room, $25,000 a ticket. And because my mentor was close friends with this guy named Garrett, I got invited for free. And it made no sense for my wife and I to be in the room, but we were there.
How many years ago? How many months
This
ago?
was 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
5 years ago. Yeah. And basically he was sharing this concept and his philosophy around how he helps people become economically independent. So this was more in the finance sector that he's speaking about this topic of changing results. But the thing he said, it was like, of course. So he's like, everyone wants their money situation to be different. Every single person. You want your money situation to be different, I'm sure. Like I want my money situation. Everyone wants a better money situation. Everyone wants to be compensated better. he said that the difference is not, and the focus is not on compensation. You can't just change your compensation by focusing on compensation. He's like, the only way your compensation changes is if you focus on creating more value. Value is the thing that creates more compensation, right? So you become more valuable to the marketplace, to the customer you're trying to serve, to your boss. If you're an employee, then guess what? You're going to be compensated better. So your compensation is actually not in accordance with anything else other than the value that you deliver. And then he's like, and this is where I was like, okay, that's really great. But he's like, if your value is not changing, meaning you're not becoming more valuable, you're not delivering more value to the marketplace, you don't have a value problem, you have a vision problem. And vision in the sense of, and this is where I would start to equate it. And as I'm telling this story, I want everybody to kind of be thinking of like, okay, what area of my life do I want to change? Maybe it is money. Maybe it is your relationships. Maybe it is your physical health. Whatever it is, it's like, what do you want to change? And ultimately, you got to become more valuable. But the reason maybe you're not becoming more valuable is probably because you don't have a big enough vision. And he said, if you want to become more valuable and create more value, then you actually have to get a bigger vision, and not just a selfish vision, but a vision of impacting, a vision of serving other people, a vision that's bigger than yourself. And he said, if you can get a vision bigger than yourself and you can create a vision of serving people, then guess what? You will never have a lack of needing to create more value. You always be on the search to becoming extremely valuable, which will then in turn in making more money.
So you're pretty much saying that in order for someone to be able to be compensated better and achieve what they want to achieve, they have to find a way to bring more value in whatever market or community they're serving.
Yes.
So for the same reason, if you're looking for change your life, you have to find a way to bring more value to yourself as an individual.
Yeah. You have to find a way to, and really it comes down to serving, right? How are you serving other people, right? How are you serving, let's just say in your marriage, right? Let's just say, how's your marriage going to get better? It's not going to get better just because your spouse gets better.
Sure.
It's because you get better, right? You serving your spouse. How do you get better? How does your health and fitness get better? You serving your body. What does serving your body look like? It means don't be eating Haagen-Dazs, at 11 p.m. at night, every night, an ice cream, right? Big ice cream sandwich. Don't be, just avoiding workouts. Don't be there's a lot of things that are not serving your body in the health and fitness realm that if you focus, okay, how do I serve? And that's where I think the value side is really easy. Is how do I serve this area better? And then ultimately, and he didn't say this in the seminar, but I realized it afterwards, was if you have a vision problem, because there are some people that, I've met that aren't necessarily like us, that aren't driven, that aren't like, hey, I'm on a mission because I have this vision and I want to become more valuable and I'm getting better results. There are some people who don't have that bigger vision. And the Bible says where there's no vision, people perish. So that's a bad thing, right? So at the end of the day, it's not, oh, well, if you don't have a vision, it's okay. It's actually not okay because you're going to perish. So what's the problem? The problem is an ownership problem. So if you have a vision problem, you actually don't have a vision problem. You have an ownership problem. And ownership in the sense of, are you willing to own your life? Are you willing to own the results of your life? That it doesn't really matter whether your parents were good or bad, whether your relationships, whether the economy, whatever situation you're in, was it good or bad? Who cares? If you're willing to own it, you can actually get a vision. You can actually then bring more value, become more valuable, and then you can get better results. But if you're not willing to own your results in your fitness, if you're not willing to own your results in your business, not willing to own your results in your marriage and this, that, the other, you'll abdicate responsibility. And that's not going to, your vision's not going to fall on somebody who's abdicated responsibility for their life or for a certain area. So I found that you can only dream as big, get a vision as big as what you're willing to take ownership for. And I think in the same way, whether it be personally or a business or something that you want to do, you can only dream as big as the problem you're willing to take ownership for. And sometimes that taking ownership is taking ownership for someone that you're working for, or taking ownership for the marriage that is really, you feel like it's 50-50, but you got to put it on yourself as 100%. And that's just, the philosophy that I've found is fundamental. And so have really built our systems and our, principles, everything that we do off the back of that.
So you pretty much help company and individual to achieve the best version of themselves by creating a system. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's a good way of saying
walk
it.
me through the step-by-step type of introduction of this philosophy and how someone that is watching this podcast can learn just by, you giving kind of an intro
Yeah.
of what is working with you and
Yeah.
your philosophy with that.
Yeah. So the company's name is Vival Group, and I like saying that because it's not a random name that we chose. It was very intentional, and it means Vive all, right? To bring life to all, and so for us, the reason I chose that name was because when I was 9 years old, I lost my dad, and he died of a massive heart attack at 52, which is pretty young. And he was an entrepreneur, and he was on the verge of becoming very successful, was in the tax strategy space. How many want to get better at tax strategy? Praise God. And it's like a very complicated arena, but he found a way to make things simple. And so he wrote books, he worked for the New York Times and wrote all these stuff. And then he was building a website this was before websites and advertisements online, all this stuff was big. And he was on the verge of seeing that really start to take off. But while he was so heads down focused on that one thing, he actually ended up forsaking his health and fitness and all this stuff, ended up, because of his health, dying early. And obviously that was traumatic from, a family side of things. Like a family now grew up without a dad, a husband, father, all the things. And so that was terrible. But I would say also terrible was a vision that was meant to impact, serve, help other people, ended up never becoming reality, which was his business. And so to me at that age, none of this really set in at that age, but there was something that happened at that point in my life that said in some way, and I think this is really all of us, and this is kind of where people find their purpose, I think, is in pain, right? Because pain is never meant to just sit there and be, like forever damaging. It's actually meant to become a scab and something that we can help others heal from. And so to me, I've often found that people's pain becomes their purpose, right? And the things that once they suffered from become the things that they actually help other people not suffer from.
You say something beautiful about the pain. Do you mind repeat it again? You're saying pain is not meant to just hurt you, but it's meant to, see as a scar, but also helping other people achieving a better result.
Yeah.
Can you say one more time?
Yeah. So pain is never meant to just be like a wound, like an open wound forever, right? So pain, whether it's a traumatic thing that happened like myself, or whether it was something that happened in business or some partnership or somebody left you or married or whatever it was, right? It's never meant to stay open wounds because open wounds get infected, right? It's meant to actually heal. And the best way for it to heal is for you to know that it's going to heal and to do the things that need to get done to get it healed. Because then once it heals, there's going to be a scar there. And if there's a scar there, what happens is you and I go about doing life. And if we're willing to show our scars, someone else will say, oh, I have the same scar, but mine's actually still a wound. How did you get healed from that? How did you overcome that? You're on the other side of where I'm on the front side of, how did you?
So pretty much it kind of remind me the theme of vulnerability. Because you're mentioning, it's a scar for other people to see, but also, in a sense, you're also be able to be vulnerable to other people to say, hey, how do you come up with a cure for this scar?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So how do you, not you, but like how does a average Joe, he's able to be a vulnerable person with someone that he's next to and try to heal with that? How can he find the right people to be a better version of himself and have them guide him to heal?
I think humility is the first part, right? So I think it's not this pride of like, I have to have everything together. For me, that really was the thing that train wrecked my life at about 19, 20, 21, was I felt like I had to have everything together. I felt like I had to have, because I was insecure, because I wasn't healed up from my wound of daddy issues, because I was still scared and afraid and angry and all these things. And so for me, what train wrecked my life was a lack of humility. I was in a situation where I had graduated high school. I had good grades, and I got into a really good school to go to college. Started going to college, and my grandparents had set aside a good amount of money for me to go to college, and it was a little over $100,000, and that would have gotten me through 4 years. No debt, which is pretty awesome in today's day and age. And it was a gift that was given to me. And so I get about a year and a half into going to college. I'm getting good grades. I'm doing well because I have this focus that I'm going to be a lawyer. All my family on the Jewish side, I grew up Catholic and Jewish. It's a very strange scenario, but all my Jewish side they were like attorneys, right? Like really good attorneys, and they were doing really well. And so I was like, I want to be an attorney. And so I had, since I was very young, thought that was going to be the way I was going to help the world, right? I was going to make an impact, make a difference. I was going to be an attorney. And so I get about a year and a half into school, and I was at a school where you could take kind of like your major classes before you got your general education done. So I was taking like pre-law, like earlier than most people would in their college, careers, so to speak. And so I get to this pre-law class, and my professor's like, he was a lawyer at one point. He's like, just FYI, if you don't like this class, don't be a lawyer. Like if you don't like, because he's like, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that unless you're obsessed with this, you shouldn't be a lawyer. And so like, that's a really dumb introduction. Like I'm going to love this. It's going to be amazing. I get about 6 weeks into the class and I hate it. And I've been hating it. And I'm hoping that I'm going to like it. I hope it, because my mind, since I was like very young, was like, I'm going to be an attorney. So now my entire world is starting to capsize on me, realizing what am I even going to school for? What am I even in college for?
But do you think it's because the professor was doing a really bad job in teaching?
No, he was a great teacher. What he was doing and what was the right thing for him to do. Because here's I think and maybe we do this sometimes with our clients as well, right? Let's just talk about it from like an education perspective.
Yeah.
We try and convince everybody that everything is right for them, right? Or that our thing is right for them. So this guy loved law. I mean, he wouldn't be teaching it if he didn't love it. It's not like teachers make a buttload of money. So he was teaching law because he loved it, but he also knew and had the wherewithal, the understanding, the discernment to realize this is not for everybody. And he's probably seen friends on the other side of going through law school, paying $300,000 to go into debt to be a lawyer, and then getting on the other side of that and realizing, I don't love this, but I'm so in debt, all this sunk cost is forcing me to stay in a career that I hate. And so I imagine on the other side of that, and with that in mind, he starts every class like he started mine, which was, unless you love this, don't do it. Don't continue. So for me, it was actually the greatest gift. At the time, it was it felt like my world was capsizing. But to me, it was a great gift because what he did was basically pre-expose me to what being a lawyer would look like.
But don't you think that this is also... Well, I'm trying to play devil advocate here, talking about lawyers. Sometimes I think that it's good for you to, as an individual, it's good for you to focus on the end result.
Yeah.
And trust the process.
Yeah.
And even though you don't like what you're doing as the best, but you're looking and have a vision, talking about vision.
Yeah.
You have a vision of where you're going to go. Say, hey, you know what? I know this one is kind of like not the best things I want to do at the moment, but it's going to help me to achieve what I want to achieve. Don't you think that this is also a really good philosophy?
I agree with what you said with the vision in the long game. So we talk about like decade thinking at Vival Group. So for me, for us to work with people, they have to have decade thinking.
Yeah.
Which is like a way for us of saying, right, the whole like people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, but they underestimate what's possible in 10. So for me, I can't work with people, and I don't like working with people that only can think about this next quarter, this next year, this next 2 years, and everything is focused on now versus like, hey, let's picture 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out, 50 years out. Where do you want your life to look like? Where do you want your business to look like? And then let's reverse engineer from there.
Wow.
So what I like to do, and in this scenario, let's run with it of my life, right, at 18 years old, 19 years old. And I had only picked attorney as outcome because why?
Because it was implemented in your family.
In my family.
Kind of
so
pressure.
It was something I never chose for myself, right? Now, did some of the things make sense? But if I were to do a deep dive, and I do think that's part of what like education and college and different exposure, like if I were to go back, I would have in high school volunteered at or interned at a law practice. That would have been a better way to spend $30,000-$40,000 of money instead of like taking all these GE classes that really didn't matter to get to one pre-law class that made me realize I need to drop out. And so to me, the better way to discover, because I get it, not every kid is going to know exactly what they want to do from the get-go. Like if you were to ask me when I was, 10 years old, 7 years old, 12 years old, that I would, number one, be an entrepreneur, number two, be an executive pastor at a Christian church, I would tell you you're psycho, like you're crazy. Like there's no way you're doing either of those things. But that's what the process of kind of discovery and growing up, and then obviously, like developing vision with all of that stuff in mind has to happen. So I think people are a lot better off if they're younger to kind of explore different trades, explore different, like get around different communities, get around different mentors and different environments where you get to like try stuff. Because I think, you know, the more you get around the thing that you really are built for, you'll sync with it.
I agree with that, because I feel like, for example, in Italy, there is no the mentality over there is do this, do this, do this. That's it. It's it's insane how family does not encourage you to try different things and fail. It's okay to fail.
Yeah. Do you feel like in Italy that's different?
That's how it is in Italy. In Italy, it's like
don't fail.
Don't fail. Don't fail. Don't fail.
Okay.
Don't fail. Like to try this. Oh my gosh.
Like safety.
Yeah. Too much safety. Too much safety. You know, like people at 30 years old, they're still living with mom and pop.
Yeah. Well, that's America too. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. That's our generation right now.
I think like is
not that people were around, but your circle is, you know, your circle for a reason. So but it's definitely still a thing. It's this safety. It's this, you know, desire for safety and not looking bad in front of other people. It's a really dangerous social pressure.
It is. I feel like it's the worst advice that you can give to your son or daughter.
Yeah.
Say, hey, safe. Like that's, I don't think that there is growth. It's like water, right? Like water is so good, so beautiful, but then if water stay in the same position all over and over, it's going to begin smell good. It's going to start being dirty. Water need to flow. Water need to flow. And the same thing also, your experience need to flow. You have to go and hit the wall so many times. That's beautiful what you said. So you pretty much start up this company, create this company, and your passion is to helping other people achieve the best result. You mentioned that you have also decade thinking. It's beautiful because also Sony, they have decade thinking. They have 50 years long thinking. And that shows you how longevity they're looking, like they're creating things for longevity. They're not creating things for like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years type of thing. How did you come up with this strategy of 10 years, of 20, 30, 40 years?
I would say for me, when I was looking at what we wanted to do with Vival Group, and a lot of it, like I said, came out of the obsession of what happened with my dad, where I was like, why don't visions become reality like his? And then how do you make sure you don't sacrifice your life on the altar of achievement was kind of a thing that I realized I don't want those two things to happen to other people. So I decided to get fascinated and then obsessed with something that could solve for that. And so the more I looked at really, really great companies, right, really great organizations, ones, because we believe in another one of our values is building the leader. We believe if you can build the leader will build great teams. And if you can build great teams, you can build great organizations. And if you can build great organizations, they can change the world. Because you look at really great impacts in the world, they were made by really great organizations, which are ultimately developed by really great teams, which are ultimately, inspired by a really great leader. And so for me, when I looked at the biggest impact that we could make, I realized that it wasn't just helping, a company that's at zero get to like 1 million or 2 million. Because once again, that's not really decade thinking. That's a random achievement, but it's like, how do you want to serve? How do you want to impact? What dent do you want to make in the universe, as Steve Jobs said? And if you look at it, the ones that made the biggest difference were the ones that were thinking about the 30, 50, years down the line. And so for me, that was the inspiration. It wasn't some random like, oh, I really want to think like long-term. It was like the only way to actually make a big difference is if you think long-term. So if you read a book, and I would recommend this one to anybody listening, is Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Good to Great.
Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's an incredible book, but it's basically like a research study of the companies. I think it was 11 companies side by side. So same industry. So they went like A and B company for the same industry, and they went different industries, 11 different companies, and they studied them. And the ones that they called great were the ones that were able to beat the market, the market that they were in by 4 times or more, which is massive. Like they were crushing it. And the other ones, the good ones, were the ones that were not. And so basically, they just did this massive research study for years. They studied each and every one of these companies, their executive teams, their personnel, all the things. And they basically created a book on what's the difference between good and great companies. So why did some that were 1 point good, and they had to beat the market by 4 times for 15 straight years. 15 straight years. Not just be in business for 15 straight years, not just be good for 15 straight years, beat the market by 4 times or more. And so that's, a lot. There's a lot of study in there about big long-term thinking.
So that means that they needed to profit about 40% per year.
No, whatever the market was. So let's say that the average market.
Let's just say the average is about 10%, right?
Yeah,
in the market.
Yeah. Then they were at 40%. It's like an example, but there's other factors in there. But yeah, they were just crushing it.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were significantly crushing it.
So you mentioned leadership. Who do you think is a leader? How do you identify a leader?
I like to define a leader as someone who's willing to take absolute ownership over, number one, their life, because you can't be a leader if you don't own your own life, and the results that you have. Number two, the problem that you want to solve. And number three, the people that you're entrusted with. So that you're entrusted with. So like your employees, right? Your clients, all the things. So for me, it starts with ownership, right? Because once again, ownership turns into vision, vision turns into value, value turns into results. So someone who's leading that charge of better results has to start with personally taking ownership of their life, and then secondarily taking ownership of the problem that they want to solve, and thirdly, the people that they're entrusted with.
Wonderful. Do you think that leaders have to babysit?
No.
Because, it
depends.
I want to be vulnerable with you, talking about vulnerability. People have told me that they see charisma when they see me, they see charm when they see me, they see leader when they see me. But I don't see myself as a leader. And the reason why, I think that because I do not like having people around me and then kind of micromanage.
Yeah.
Like babysit them.
Yeah.
For me, like, it's like so clear sometimes, and like, why don't you fucking get it? Sorry for cussing, but it's like, and I prefer having professional next to me, for example, right?
Yeah.
I'm in solar.
Yeah.
So the solar mentality and solar strategy is, you become someone that sells solar, and then you build a team down you, and then you teach other people, you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So I don't like that. I don't like to have mentees under me. I don't like to waste a lot of time. I rather having professional, like in real estate, mortgage protection, whatever it is. They understand how the homeowners think. They have some type of clientele, and that I can build a referral program, so I'm able to helping other homeowners finding a solar solution. So that's my route. Yeah. Now, how can a person like me, with a slim to none passion, to mentor other people, can become a better leader, if you would say this way?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to, number one, you've taken ownership of your life, which is awesome. You've taken ownership of the problem, right? And number three, then it becomes, I want to take ownership of the people that I'm entrusted with. Now, in the current circumstance, the people you're entrusted with are partners, right? You're building partners, right?
Yes.
Now, if you want to make a difference and develop other people who maybe didn't or don't think like you yet, then that's where you would want to build a team. But it's willing to take ownership of, okay, I'm gonna take ownership of where these people are at and help them get where they need to get to. Now, with that said, I think the problem that most people have is they end up in a micromanaging situation for a couple reasons. I think number one, you have to have a standard of the people that you allow on your team, right? And so the only way you have a standard is if you have a blueprint. We call it an organizational blueprint. So for us, as I've talked about a couple of our values, we have a set of 8 values that are built off of outcomes that are standards for us. They're not like, I hope we get them. They're not like, well, we'll build towards this. To us, it's minimum standards for us that we must like live by. And so for us, nobody's a client and nobody is a team member, like on our team for Vival Group, without these standards of really these 8 values that we're built on. So if you don't have a clear set of organizational values and sometimes they're personal values, right, as well for you, if you're more of like, it's my personal side, Valor has values, right, but you might have certain values that are non-negotiable for you, for someone to work with you. And then what happens is you've now set a standard. You have raised the bar. And for someone to come and work with you, they have to be at this bar. Now, that's a character bar.
Okay.
Right? So there's 4 bars. There's a character bar, there's a competency bar, there's a chemistry bar, and there's a capacity bar. So this is basically leadership development in 4 categories. Character bar is, can I trust you?
Okay.
So, the first test that someone has to pass to be on a team, that, you know, if you're setting a standard, a high caliber leadership team, is number one, can I trust you? Not can I trust you like, you know, Marco, I'm going to hand you $100 bill. Like, will you hand it back to me? Or will you go run down the street with it? It's, can I trust you to make decisions the way I would make decisions? That's where most organizations get bottlenecked, is because the leader or the founder, and going from founder to CEO is a big step, because you go from making all the decisions yourself, pioneering, starting this, changing this, moving this, doing that, to now having to teach other people to do it, right? And you, for example, are brilliant at what you do, but the next phase of growth and leadership is always, now, how do I get other people to not just do what I need them to do, because that's micromanaging? How do I get them to think how I think? And so that's where the organizational values come into play, because it's a decision-making framework that says, if you get to this point in the road, if you're part of our organization, we go left, we don't go right. And so that is a significant way to vet the people that come in, to make sure when you're interviewing them, they don't even get past the first, like you don't even go into competency, you don't go to chemistry, you don't even go into capacity, what those are at, until they pass the character test. So let's say you interview 10 people for a role, right? Let's say only 3 of them pass the character test. Then they go into, and that's, you know, really, you know, an important way for you to say, how do I make sure I know if they would pass the character test? Sometimes you have to work with somebody to kind of see like what it's like for you working with them, how they kind of filter these decisions. Other times you can say, hey, can you tell me a story about how you've once had decade thinking? Or, hey, can you tell me a story about how you really believe in the power of building leaders? You know, for me, like, tell me the story of whatever. And sometimes if they don't have a story for that, or they don't believe in that, or you could just say all the values, hey, this is what we believe, this is what we value. If this is a problem for you, I need to know now. And oftentimes people will just say, oh, I don't really, tell me about this, I don't really agree, or whatever. And then it's an easy conversation, easy done. The next phase is competency. So there are certain leadership competencies and different competencies you need people to have, right? So there's emotional intelligence, there's communication, there's managing of like systems, right? There's all kinds of stuff that people need to have as you're developing leaders. So you need to develop competence. That's the third one is chemistry. So can you gel with us? So there's certain people, right, that probably maybe even pass the character test, maybe even they're really highly skilled for the role that you want them in, but you just don't vibe with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, I can't really put the finger on it, but like, we're just not. And sometimes time changes that, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And so you don't want those people on your team. The last test is capacity. Can you grow with us? That really is a personal decision for them. The reality is most people that start with you won't end with you, because as you grow, they have to grow with the organization, or at the end of the day, they're going to be the reason that you're stuck. And so oftentimes the founding team, like if you ever watch companies get acquired by like private equity companies, sometimes it's a personal preference, like whether the firm just like, hey, we have these, you know, CEOs, COOs, CFOs, we have this team that we always like to put in these new companies because they just get us, they understand us. It's more of a personal preference, but oftentimes it's a competency and a capacity preference, where it's like, hey, you got this company to $10 million a year, but you don't have the capacity to get the company to $20 million a year, $30 million a year. And part of that's a skill set, but a lot of it too is the ability to let go of things that you used to focus on and focus on the stuff that actually moves the needle now, and delegate the rest of it. So in this context, I know it's kind of a long-winded way of answering it, but imagine you start with 10 people that you interview, right? You probably only end up with actually one, maybe one out of that 10 that's going to pass all those tests. So for me, a lot more of it is selection, which is hard in solar specifically, because, you know, at first you're kind of just looking for bodies, but what sets you apart, and I believe what sets Valor apart, is this values standard that exists that allows you to really filter people from the get-go, set a standard to begin with. Because, you know, if somebody comes on like to a team and there's no standards, well, that makes it kind of a low bar for them to hurdle over, versus if there's a high standard, then for them, it's like, oh, I've got to bring my A game all the time, right? Like I really have to step up and lean into this. And then I would say just making sure for people to stick around a long time, they have a vision that's bigger than themselves they can contribute towards. Number 2, they're compensated reasonably. And number 3, they're personally and professionally developed. But oftentimes, so that's kind of the initial side. The other reason sometimes you get stuck in micromanagement is because you give someone a result, but don't let them influence the how. Meaning, hey, I need you to go out and do this, but I need you to do it this way exactly. You cannot budge on the system. And that to me is where we get in trouble, because we want someone to be responsible for a result, but we don't give them authority to change the process or the how, right? So where I found myself get in trouble is if I'm like, hey, I want you to go and execute this result, and this is how I want you to go do it. Where does that leave any room for creativity or problem solving, or the reality that the way that I've maybe done it up until now has expired, or there's a better way to do something, right? And so that gives them the freedom to say, hey, as long as this is the result and this is how you win, this is how you lose, but the how, here's how I've done it, but feel free to change it, but you still have to get this result. That empowers somebody to say, I have agency to change something. I have ingenuity. I have ownership. I have buy-in. And sometimes the reason we're micromanaging is because we haven't been giving people the proper buy-in to actually like own it themselves, right? So it's an ownership problem at the end of the day.
It's an ownership problem.
Yeah, it's always an ownership problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So would you say that a leader becomes a leader? Sorry, do you think that someone is a born leader, or do you think they can become a great leader?
They can become.
So it's a skill.
It's a skill. Yeah. Well, it's a skill and it's a process. It's a willingness. Because here's the truth. I don't even know if it's a skill. There are certain leadership skill sets that are needed. Like I said, communication, right? Decision-making, problem solving, strategy, knowing how to read financial statements. I mean, I could list you off a dozen critical leadership skill sets. But once again, a skill set that is not a skill set, but is must for leaders is they have to be willing to take ownership. So that's more of a character, right, choice that they have to make, is saying, I'm going to be somebody that takes ownership, absolute ownership for my life, absolute ownership for the problem I'm trying to solve for the organization that I'm leading, and then absolute ownership for the people that I'm entrusted with. So for me, but that can be learned, right? For me, it had to be learned through humility. But everybody has to eventually make that choice if they want to be a leader that people want to follow.
Impressive. So I was impressed when I saw you speak at the conference, and you talk about how everybody set up goals, but not everybody achieved them. Like 90% of the people don't achieve their goal by Q1, or you say something along the line. Can you explain to me what is the blueprint, and the audience, what is the blueprint of how to set up goals and actually achieve them?
Yeah. So 6% of people actually write goals down. And then I think maybe 4% of that actually hit goals. So you're talking about a very small amount of people that actually hit their goals. And to me, that became a significant pillar in our problem that we were trying to solve of how do visions become reality, right? Because if you don't hit your goals, vision's not becoming reality. And so really what it comes down to is a process. We call it the vision acceleration system. And so for us, you have to, number one, start with the big picture, right? Where am I at? Where do I want to be? So we call this this kind of philosophy. I don't know if I touched on this at the conference, but it's called IRA. So it's called awareness, intentionality, reflection, adaptation. That is the overarching vision acceleration framework. If you listen to nothing else today but this will help you in every area of your life hit your goals. So the first one is, where am I at? So awareness asks us a few questions, right? Awareness is number one, where am I? Where am I? And that could be compartmentally, meaning only in my health and fitness, or it could be your whole life, right? Where am I in my health, fitness, in my marriage, in my business? It helps in any category of life. So where am I at? Because we have to start with reality, or we'll never get to where we want to go. The second question is, where do I want to go, right? What's possible? And not what's possible, I want to be an attorney, but where do I want to go? Oh, I realize I actually want to be an entrepreneur, right? Either are possible, but not possible is not always the best outcome, right? It's where do I want to go? But dream really big. And so then you paint that picture, right? And once again, if you're willing to take ownership of that thing, then you can actually dream about it. And then the last question is, who's been there before that can help me? Mentors accelerate your life because they are already over here. They are already reached the gap, and they can tell you how to navigate all the issues, all the obstacles, all the difficulties, all the challenges, and say, hey, why don't you focus over here instead of over here? You'll get better results. So those are the three questions. Where am I at? Where do I want to be? And then who's been there before? The second pillar is intentionality. Intentionality has a few aspects of it. Number one is, what is the 20%? We've all heard of the 80-20 principle, right? That 20% of activities generate 80% of results. 80% of activities generate 20% of results. So basically, there's a few things that move the needle a lot, and there's a lot of things that barely move the needle. So the question is, how do I go from spending my time focusing on the lot of things that barely move the needle to the few things that move the needle a lot? And that really becomes the question in your health and fitness, in your business, in your marriage, because most people are saying, how do I have time to do all these things? How do I have time to be the best husband? How do I have the time to be an incredible entrepreneur? How do I have the time to be a great friend? How do I have the time to be a great father? How do I have the time? And the reality is because you're spending all of your time focusing on stuff that doesn't move the needle. A lot of things that barely move the needle. What if you spent in every category your time invested, very focused on a few things that move the needle a lot? And so that becomes a question. And the way that you find that out faster is either number one, falling on your face over and over again until you figure it out, right? Or, and that's usually kind of goes like if you're in a pitch black room playing pin the tail on the donkey. Like it takes you forever, right? And then finally one day you open up the lights, you're like, oh, I finally hit it. After 10 years of trying to get my health and fitness right, I didn't hire a mentor, I didn't hire a trainer, but now I figured it out because I finally just failed over and over again. That's a bad way to approach life, right? The better way is to go find somebody that's already done it, right? Go find the person who has the health and fitness you want. Ask them what they eat, right? Ask them what they work out. Ask them for the 20% that moves the needle, 80%. This applies to every single area of life. Eventually, you'll basically compile a list of activities that generate the results that you want in a very fast way. But there has to be humility to approach that person and then follow what they say. Right? Now, you don't want to go to somebody who has a great marriage but doesn't have great health and fitness and take their advice for every area of life. That's why it's important to find people who are individually good at the things that you want, because there's not a single person out there that is going to have every single category nailed exactly to the desired level that you want. So that's intentionality. The second part of intentionality is, how do I habituate this? How do I habituate this? And a lot of that comes down to making sure that you know how to form habits. And there's a process for that. I don't have time to get into all the habit formation process, but there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Incredible book for those of you that want to read that. Also a great book on kind of intentionality and discipline, all that stuff, and driving results is The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a great book as well. Probably more business centered, but can still be applied fundamentally. So you have intentionality, right? What's the 20% that moves in 80%? You have how do I basically automate these habits so then I can take on more capacity? Because if you're not thinking about, like, I don't think about brushing my teeth. I don't think about driving the car. I used to, but now I don't, because it's just automated. It's a habit. And habit is actually, if you look in the, really interesting, if you look at the word identity in the original language, it means repeated way of being. In other words, we don't decide our future, we decide our habits decide our future. So you could argue that we are not what we choose, we are what we do repeatedly, which would be our habits. And so if you want to change your identity, aka where you are to where you want to be, you actually have to change your habits. That's a significant part of that. And so that's why habit formation is really big, and aligning those with the 20% that moves the needle 80%. So that's the second step. The third step is reflection. Reflection asks us, it's basically like a feedback mechanism. The reason most people don't hit their goals is because they look at their goals once a year. Right? And they're like, why didn't I hit my goals this year? Well, that'd be like, if you look as good as you do, my gosh, you look amazing, Marco. If you look like you do right now, and it was January 1, you went out, you had a great night, it was January 1, you looked in the mirror, you're like amazing, but then you weren't allowed to look in a reflective surface for 12 months. How do you think you'd look?
Shit.
Yeah, not great, right? But that's how most people treat their goals. And they wonder why they don't hit them. It's like the reason you look good every day is because you look in a mirror every single day and you make modifications based on what needs to get addressed, whether it's your hair, whether it's your beard, whether it's your tie, whether, like, you're constantly able to look in a reflective surface. If you don't treat your goals like that, then you can't expect to hit them. You can't expect for them to look good. And so in the same way, we really strongly recommend with our clients, we implement an annual system, a quarterly system, and then a weekly system for reflection. And then that asks you what's working, what's not, right? What about my hair is right? What about my hair needs some improvement? Bada bing, bada boom. You do that across all the different areas of life, you're good to go. And the last one's adaptation. Basically, how do you apply the learnings from reflection? And that we developed a system for to be able to integrate this into an operating system, a way of living. So how do you hit your goals? From a philosophy perspective, that's what you do. Awareness, intentionality, reflection, adaptation. And basically what you do to adopt those is you take your 10-year, you develop a 10-year vision based on all that, for every area of your life across the board, every area, because you can't leave one out. You got to do all the different areas, and then you reverse engineer those into 3 to 5 year targets. So if this is where I want to be in 10 years, where do I have to be in 3 to 5 years? What are some significant milestones that have to happen? And then by the end of this year, 2024, in this case, where would I need to be on track for the 3 to 5 year targets? And then based on my end of year targets, we're about to start quarter 3, right? In 4 weeks. Where do I need to be by the end of quarter 3 to then be on track for my end of year targets? And then you build a scoreboard around each and every area of life for your quarter 3 that moves the needle on your year, that moves the needle on your 3 to 5 year, that moves the needle on your 10 year. And within each and every one of your scoreboards, you have these results that you want to achieve, whether it's weight release, whether it's a revenue number, whether it's your marriage, whatever it is. But you have to have activities drilled into there. And those are your 20%. Those are your 3 to 5 activities that move the needle on each and every result that you want to hit. Maybe it's 2 to 3 activities. And those each have measurements. So if it's a revenue number, let's say I want to hit, as we kind of demonstrated, right, in the conference, let's say somebody wants to make, $500,000 in the quarter in revenue, or $500,000 in sales, whatever it is. And they need to, let's say, they know what their leading measures are. They know their activities. They need to make 100 calls a week, or they need to knock 100 doors a day, whatever it is. And so you calculate that number up over 12 weeks, and then you say, okay. And then you track that. And then you make sure that you either hit the activity or hit the result. And if you don't hit either, you implement a consequence. We call it the accountability box. So that way you have something that you have full control over, doors knocked. You have something you don't have control over, revenue. And then you have a consequence that's painful and that's embarrassing and that other people are holding you accountable for. That if you don't hit the thing that you have control over and you don't hit the thing you don't have control over, or you do have control over, then guess what? You get the consequence. But if you do hit either one, then you get the reward. That's how we get our clients at 90+% of their goals every quarter, is because every single quarter in every area of life, they have the activities that will move the needle on the results, that if they hit those, they don't get the consequence, or they have the result that they get to hit. And then they have a consequence that we're holding them accountable for.
I have to say, I'm impressed to the way that you are speaking, bro. Like, you look like, wow. I was like, I don't know if you saw my facial expression. I was mind blown. So many bombs dropped from you, bro. Unbelievable. You definitely blow my mind. So if someone is looking to start working with you, you're going through a series of understanding if the client will be a good candidate, right? Based on standard.
Yeah. And really, from a private client. So we have a few ways of implementing what we do, because we go through 5 pillars. So for us, the reason organizations don't fulfill their full potential, the reason leaders can't get above their businesses and enjoy their life, reach their full potential, is 5 things. Number 1 is life cohesion. So like my dad, he didn't integrate his whole life in his business. He just had a bunch of different, he just focused mostly on his business, and when his business was going well, he'd focus on his life, and then if vice versa, whatever. And so we have a way of making sure your whole life is integrated the same way. So we have an operating system. The second reason that people don't hit it is their teams and their structures, right? So they don't have the right people in the right seats, really the right people on their teams, or they don't have a way of making sure that their culture, their way of thinking, their decision-making is permeated throughout. So we take them through a system for that. Then systems. So systems is, how do you make sure that your systems don't break you, but that you break them in advance? It's called reinvention. It's why some companies do this and then end up capsizing because they didn't break before it broke them. And then focus, which is what we just talked about, right? How do you make sure your team, your organization, your life is aligned with 10-year, 3 to 5, 1 year quarterly scoreboard, making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. Everyone's in their highest and best use. And then accountability, right? Making sure you're actually doing what you're said to do. So we take you through those 5 pillars. We have a few different ways of implementing that. Some people like a more hands-on approach, faster integration. And so we have a private client option. The spots are few because we only can take on a handful of those because of the reality of how much intensive it is. But we take you one-on-one through that. So there's no coursework. You can access all that, but, and then we basically get you implemented into our app framework. And so we have that option. We also have an option where there's kind of like an accelerated version of our, kind of guided option that's self-guided. So you get a little bit of hand-holding, but it's still like you have our course, our content, our app, all in our custom app. And then we also have, hey, if you just want to jump in, we have a free trial available for our app, and there's coursework on there, there's downloads on there, and you can jump into that at any point. And so you kind of go at your own pace.
I'm just curious, do you mind breaking down the pricing and also the value that each of those strategy is able to bring to an individual?
Yeah.
Or is it more customized?
The private client's a bit customized, but I can touch on general prices. Yeah. So there's a lot of different organizations out there that do a version of this, right? And so even when I was in the companies, and as I still am, part of a company, I was always looking for an operating system that could work, because I didn't need to go invent one myself 4 years ago. I just wanted to look for one that worked, and none of them really worked. It was like they worked kind of, or they didn't address this or they didn't address that. And so I was like, man, I just kind of need to create my own. So what we did was we took kind of a lot of the different pieces of some and then kind of reduced it down to, I love this quote. It's, what's perfection? Perfection is not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And so it's basically this, like, just what's the absolute minimum that needs to produce a result. And so there's a lot of companies out there that'll charge you like $6,000 a day for 2 years. At once a month, they'll do like once a month sessions, $6,000 a day. So that's like a grip of money to install something like this. So what we did was we said, how do we do this in a way where we can do like a one-time installation fee, and then depending on how many partners the organization has, whether it's founding team or whether it's executive team, we can just basically staple it on top of that, but be a one-time thing, and then they stay on the app forever. So right now, the implementation for like a private client is $20,000 to be one-on-one, and then if they have 5 partners, then you do 5 times 5, so it's $55,000 for that type of client at the moment. That's going to depend and always kind of adjust depending on our strategist availability. Then the secondary option where you have like the hybrid solution where you'll get 4 one-on-one calls with myself or one of our strategists for 1 hour while you're going through the coursework and the content to go through those 5 pillars, implement the vision acceleration system on the app itself. That's anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, depending on if you have a couple partners or if it's just you. And that's kind of like a hybrid. You have the community, you have the app, you have the content, you have a ton of coursework, all that stuff. So that's that. And then for our app, what we have is a 2-week free trial. It's self-guided, so you don't get any support, any help, but you get that all by yourself. That's $97 a month. And then if you're like, hey, after the 2-week trial, I want to do the $97 a month. I don't need any help. I don't need any community. I just want to be doing this myself. I can handle it. Great. There are people like that. That's the people that like read the book and they can implement everything in the book immediately, which there are people like that. So I want to, God bless them. But then if you're like, no, I want the full system. I want to be able to like harness everything in there and have community and have weekly accountability calls. We have for $297 a month, and that's where you get everything involved. But there's no contract. You can, sign up.
So it's $297 a month, and then you get everything, and there is no contract, but you're not getting the one-on-one.
Correct. You are getting a group call though every single week.
Group call.
Weekly group call. You get the community, the content, ongoing content that's posted in there, master classes. So. And we did that because for the longest time we were just one-on-one. Like we would only work one-on-one with people. So like I'd go to a conference, like yours, and I want to help as many people as I can. But the reality is I only have so much bandwidth. Sure. And so it was like, okay, number one, if I don't have bandwidth to take on, if there's 400 people there, I only have bandwidth to take on maybe like 5 to 6 over the course of like the next 6-7 months. Like that's not a lot of people. And I can't help as many people. Whereas if I'm like, hey, we built an app, a custom app that allows you to go through the same content. I'm teaching the content. I'm on the coursework, and then have opportunities where we could have group involvement. Then I can scale that opportunity to help people. And so we went from only taking on clients at a really high level to then being able to say, hey, if you can only get started for $297 a month or you want to start there, freaking awesome. Like you can. So for us, it was like, oh wait, how do we help more people to be able to step into this process? Because it shouldn't just be for people that can afford a $20,000 investment up front.
I love that.
Yeah.
What do you think is, let's just say a regular person is watching this podcast and is like super excited about everything you're saying, but he saying, hey man, I only have 24 hours. Yes, everybody has 24 hours, but how can I be a great family man? How can I go to the gym? How can I do this? How can I do that? And still hit my goals every single freaking day.
Yeah.
What is the how-to type of thing for a daily regiment or basis for someone to achieve their goals?
Yeah. I'd say they have to become, first of all, they have to own.
Own it.
Own it. Own where you're at. Own the good, own the bad. If it's a lot of bad, own it and know that you can change. Because if you can change what you're putting into your mind and your beliefs, then you can change how you think. If you can change how you think, you can change how you feel. If you can change how you feel, you change what you do. If you change what you do, you'll change what you have, right? And so ultimately, you have to, number one, own where you're at. Number two, you got to get around people that have a different situation, because that'll be a massive accelerator for them to change how they think and create different standards. And then start reading books. Like The Magic of Thinking Big is a great book. Atomic Habits, incredible book. Just anything that you can get your hands. Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. I mean, I could list off. I have 160 books in my Audible right now that I've been reading over the last 10 years. So there's a lot of books out there. But the biggest thing that took me from being backwards $100,000 after college, because I ended up dropping out of college, wasting all that money because I just went, I know what to do with this money, pride. And so I decided I think I could do it. So I ended up backwards in a really bad way, and then found myself at ground zero, worse, and said, what can I do with my life? The first step was taking absolute ownership. This is my fault. This is not my mom's fault. This is not my uncle's fault. It's not anybody else. This is not the college fault. This is my fault, but I can change. And I'm going to start by changing how I think, which is going to change by me ingesting something different. And so I would say find a way to get around people that have a different situation than you, that have the situation that you want, and then start reading. Like, read ravenous. I'm sure you love reading as well. I've found that not all readers are leaders, but every leader I know is a reader, because they know that there's things out there that they don't know. And the reality is books are really cool, because whether it's audio or whether it's physical, people have spent their entire life learning something, and then they sell it to you for $14. That's crazy. But it's the way the scale of the economies of scale work in that kind of sector, is like, you can do that. And so for me, it was like, why wouldn't I? So let's just say, for example, right, I'm taking out my calculator real quick. So I've read 160 books, right? Let's say they're each $15, because that's what I paid for Audible. So I spent $2,400 on all that. I would say those books have made me a lot of money, like infinitely times that, like 300 times what I've invested in that. So to me, it's like, there's no other, like, it doesn't make sense not to do that.
Sure.
So I would just say, for someone who's in that situation, I've been there. It sucks. It really sucks, but you can change. And if you're willing to take ownership, then let God give you a vision of impacting, serving other people. If you can grab a hold of that vision and say, okay, and then how can I become the person that delivers this to the world, that delivers this to my family, that delivers this to myself, that delivers this to whatever, then you work on becoming that person, and then eventually you'll get results that will change.
I love that. What do you think is power? And what's the difference between power and leadership?
Power. I think power is it depends. Like, power can be defined a lot of ways, but power to me, let's just take it in the contrasting sense that you are, right? There's a good book called 5 Levels of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. And he talks about, let's just take title is an example of power, right? And then influence is another. So he would say level 1, which is like the lowest level of leadership, is title. It's by position or power. Basically, it says someone gave you a title or a position, and because of that, you now have power, right? You didn't gain it by being trusted. You didn't gain it through certain results. You just got it because someone gave it to you. That is a dangerous, dangerous place to be, because ultimately you haven't earned it. And you won't be entrusted really long term if you stay in that position. And so power to me is something that is really not a trusted leadership. Then you get to the opposite side, which is like level 5. That person doesn't need a title, a position, anything. They walk in the room and they garner trust immediately because they have earned the trust of the people they're leading, right? And so if you look at whether that's in government, in business, in family, right? You can be a father, but you might be a level 1 father. And I'm not doing this like condemnation or shame. It's just like, if we're not delivering the results that we're supposed to our family, then guess what? We have the father position because of a title, but there's plenty of fathers out there that have abdicated their responsibility as a father. And so they may actually be a father, but not really a father. You know what I mean? Same way with like a mayor, right? Or a governor. Like, you look at California. He may have the title of governor, right? Of father of California, the one that's meant to provide, protect, the king, right? But he's the opposite of that. And so I would say in the same way, you have to be willing to take ownership and garner, right? Get a vision, deliver value, deliver results. And it has to be about other people. So that's the example of someone who like has taken ownership, has a vision, but that vision isn't about the people. And so because of that, you have results that are backwards and that are not great results. So to me, those are kind of the differences between power and leader. Leader is somebody who, once again, has taken absolute ownership of their lives, absolute ownership of the problem they're trying to solve. And it has to be for good, right? That's a good way of saying it. It has to be for good.
Who identified good, though?
Who defines good?
Because think about it. I like to play devil advocate. For some people, for example, stupid example, but I feel like the stupid example are the most effective ones sometimes. I love meat. And for me, eating meat is good.
Meat, yes.
Meat.
Yeah.
Bovine meat.
Yeah.
But then someone else say, hey, I don't like that. I don't think that this is good. I want to go with the vegan meat.
Yeah.
For me, this is good. For him, this is good. So how do we identify good?
Yeah. It's a good question. So myself being a born again, spirit-filled believer of Jesus Christ, I believe he is Lord and Savior. I believe Jesus, was built and helped to build the foundation of the earth. I believe that God is real and the Bible is real. And
what do you believe it? Do you have like an encounter?
I had a radical encounter with Jesus. Like I said, I grew up Catholic and Jewish, and my life was so backwards growing up for a lot of different reasons. And I didn't know what was true. I didn't know